This week, we're going nuts! I'm going to show you how we dig up and transplant nuts for our nut field. Stay tuned. First step, we actually find the nut trees. These are all seedling nuts, and all we did was tie an orange flagging around them. We had a frost last week, so pretty soon the nuts will start to lose their leaves. So we went around tagging all the nut trees that we have, and now we're going to dig them up to transplant. These are all seedlings put in by squirrels. We didn't plant these. The squirrels have planted all these. So if ever you're tagging trees to find them at another time, and you just tag them down here like this one is, you're really not going to see them very well. So just a hint, a trick, tag them up higher, tag them where you'll see them. And so we tag them up, and then we'll tag them as close to the tree as possible, so it makes it easier and quicker to locate. So not all shovels are equal. These are a nice, just a plain regular digging shovel. That's good to get the circular pattern around the tree, but this one is really the one I like the most to do the taproot, because it's straight, it's easy to get a good leverage point, and it's a little bit deeper. In fact, there's some that are even deeper. If you get some planting or transplanting shovels, try to get the longest one you can. So shovel differences makes a difference. So one of the first things we want to do is get a shovel in real close to it, not too close to cut the roots, but especially very vertical. So we're using a transplant shovel here. Charles has, we try to go a little bit around the tree just to really loosen all the roots without cutting them, so that when we lift the nut tree, we actually get, most important, to try to get that taproot. These seedlings already have a taproot in some cases that's a foot or 30 centimeters deep. And so we want to try to get as much of that taproot as possible, so that when we transplant it, we're actually not disturbing that taproot, so it can continue its course down to the water table here, which is at about 8 feet or 2.5 meters. Usually know when you start moving the ball if the whole tree trunk is moving. So let's check this one out, see how it works out. Oh, I see a nice taproot there. See that taproot? Hold it there for a second. Yeah, there's that taproot. So that one is basically, we get just about everything, and that's what we're aiming to do, is loosen it around, get some of the feeder roots around, but most important for the nut trees is to get as much of that taproot as possible.
So good. Apples. Yum.
So the goal here is just to basically loosen the roots all around. We may cut some, but we're at about 12 inches away from the tree. So it's a fairly big circle that we're doing. We don't want to lose roots on a young transplant like this. You really want to get everything. It's easy enough to get everything, so don't be afraid to dig deeper. We can always leave a lot of this soil right where we took it. We really just want the tree with a few. We're in the root zone, you can hear that. So by gently taking off the roots, you can see that's tree roots, as opposed to this, which is something else. It's not quackgrass, but it's something else. So tree roots definitely have that brown or orangey They feel more like wood, a little woody. And here's a nice piece. That might have been the taproot. Otherwise, that might have been the taproot here. Otherwise, there's other ones. Yeah, I think that was the taproot actually. Oh, here it is. This looks like the taproot down here. That wasn't broken, so it probably was this one. So sometimes they'll fork as well. But that's what you want to keep. You want to keep as many of those tree roots as possible. You can take some of the extra soil away from it. But that's a nice sized ball now to transplant. And that'll be the next step. Last detail is we don't want to leave holes all over. So we try to, if we have some soil, put it in there. But also just break the sides down so that we don't leave a hole to trip on mostly. So for safety's sake. The soil is pretty dry. Here's a selection of 4 that came up without a root ball. And interesting to note, some of these, when they get thicker like this, they're actually 2 years old. So you can see by here, these were cut, probably just a mower. See, that's that height, so the mower probably mowed them off. This one at this height, or this height, and then this height. That one might be maybe even 3 years old. But they formed more root hairs than closer, and this one quite a bit longer. So anyway, a comparison of a few. 1-year-olds tend to not have quite as much hairy roots on the side, but these are all very nice trees ready to transplant. When you're digging up and transplanting with trees and shrubs, and especially bare root, get them in. Here we put them in some moist soil. As long as the roots are not exposed, that's all you want to make sure. The roots aren't exposed. Doesn't take long, a couple of minutes in the sun, and those roots may completely dry up and die. So here's just a feed bag that we put on top of the trees that we took out as root balls. But keep them covered. Keep those roots covered. Don't let them go exposed. All right, so here we are in the nut field, and we're getting ready to transplant these. So we'll start with just the bare rooted ones. Tree planter, lesson 1, planting nut trees. So first he makes just a slit, and then because these are bare rooted, he can easily insert it into the slit, and the last step is really just placing the tree down. So you can see all of 30 to 45 seconds per tree. That's how you can actually plant quite a large area relatively quickly. Step is just adding some wood chips. So we actually try to wood chip right over the grass and actually put the grass down around the tree if possible, to give it a little bit more organic matter. But you see how a tree, don't forget it's in leaf, very easy to spot. But in 2 or 3 weeks when those leaves fall, it's just a small thin stem, very easy to lose in the grass. So putting these wood chips around is really a key to being able to locate the tree and give it a good start. A better start would be to put a tube around it, because these young nut trees can really suffer in the spring. We've had some that have taken 4 or 5 years to get above, really much above 1.5 feet or 50 centimeters. And so the key is to get the nut tree to escape the spring frosts. That's really the key. Any protection you can give it to be protected from the last frost of the year And we found once our trees escaped that last frost with their leaves and their buds intact, then they grew to a really rapid rate. But it's getting it through that. So a little tube can make a big difference to keep that bud, the terminal bud, protected from frost, because it is sensitive to frost. So that's all there was to it. You noticed, we just made a slit. We didn't fill the hole with all kinds of stuff. And please don't amend your soil in the hole. Only put anything you want on top. If you want to put compost, then put compost before you put the wood chips, and put wood chips on top. That's really best practice for planting trees. I know people talk about amending the holes all the time, but the research really has shown that you're better to put everything on top. And you know what? Nothing goes up, everything goes down. So anything you put on top will go down. Anything you put in the hole will cause the soil structure to change and actually prevent capillarity, which is one thing. A capillarity is the effect of the soil to pull water from deeper up. And if you've amended the soil and you've changed the soil structure, that soil won't be able to pull that water up the same way. And so put it on top, please. And that's all there is to it. This whole planting, this field here, we put in because it's the north side of our whole farm. This is the north end. And so we're putting trees that will grow to 100 feet, 120, God willing, eventually. But these are going to be the biggest trees on the farm. And so we want to give them room, but we don't want them to shade the rest of our orchard. So those of you in the southern hemisphere, we're putting these on the shade side so that we don't affect the rest of the orchard, and we'll keep the rest of the orchard in the sunny side, or in this case to the south of these big trees. So where you put big trees matters. Put them where they won't shade the rest of your trees, and they'll also give the most windbreak effect. So you see the trees we're planting, they still have leaves on. So we're in mid-September right now. We had a frost last week. That was a good indicator that, you know what, if we had a hard enough frost, these trees would lose all their leaves. So we're digging them up now in leaf. And these leaves, as they send energy to the stem, will actually grow a lot of roots. 85% of root growth happens after leaf fall. So you think, oh, I'll plant in the spring. Well, you plant in the spring, go ahead, but you're not going to get nearly as much root growth as you do if you plant in the fall. So these trees transplanted now with a mulch, which gives it the added insulation, they will actually grow roots right up until about Christmas time in this area. Even with snow on the ground, roots will still continue to grow until the soil is frozen. So try to plant in the fall as much as possible. And we're just getting a bit of a jump, but with these nut trees, it's a good one to put in now. They will frost because this is open area now. We were dug from the orchard, the permaculture orchard, and now they're going to be in the open, so they're far more likely to frost now than they did before. But that's all right. They will put up some new root growth. We'll just water these in just to make sure they have one good watering. And that's all there is to getting a nut planting going. Most of our other nut trees, actually, we seeded this area with nuts. And this is a very dry year, so we still had some of them come up. But we had other trees that we were just going to mow anyway, so we may as well have transplanted. But in the years to come, we should have a lot more nut trees come up here on their own as nuts. They're still in the ground. They didn't germinate this year. They'll germinate next year, or maybe in 2 years or 3 years. So a nut can stay there for several years until the spring conditions bring adequate moisture for that nut to get wet, for the seed inside to actually swell and pop the nut open, and for that young tree to come up. So that's all there is to it. We saw how to dig up and transplant nuts. Now it's your turn to go nuts on nuts. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Hey, please subscribe and check out our latest video.
So good. Apples. Yum. So good.